Sir, it's ready to launch. Good, thank you for the preparation. I must warn you, it's 2024. Do you think it's still worth it? I guess we have to see. So that meme is just to prove that this video is kind of supposed to recap everything in 2023, but it came out in 2024. So yeah. Oh, the exposition's ready. So 2023 is a year in the 2020s trilogy where instead of having one antagonist, this should have gazillions of bad guys coming from left and right. Basically, if the easy difficulty is 2020 to 2022, the nightmare mode is the 2023 and you're not given any tutorial, just straight thrown into the room and forced to watch Loki season 2.
Those are people. Those are lives.
But aside from release of excessive amount of bad movies and white phosphorus, there's still a lot of good causes coming out of it, and I'm here, so welcome to my review of 2023. In this video, I'll try to review every single movies and shows that I've watched in 2023 that didn't make it to its own videos, and I also started watching shows that came out in 2021 and before, so that might count as well. I will do kind of ranking of movies and shows in the very end, so let's get to it. The Last of Us TV show is a video game adaptation series that tries to be an average Hollywood post-apocalyptic movie, and it works. The creator Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann nailed the aesthetic of it, like the backgrounds and the zombies. Even though obviously they look CG, it's still decent and carries the story. It did a lot of justice when it comes to transferring what's good in the video game and left the bad things. For example, the personalities of our main character Joel and the schoolgirl Ellie felt more real. They felt more human with more expression and joy and laughter rather than the pale ones from the game. And this actually goes with other characters, if not most of them have interesting personalities and backstories that keeps the audience invested into the vast world of zombie apocalypse. There's also very good effort of bringing science and kind of worldwide globalization into the story, and it helps bringing the suspense because it just proves that this world stands no chance against the horde of zombies and the fungus infestation that starts it all. There was also one of the strongest elements that makes the world feel lifelike. The other one is the painful backstory of Joel and how he has to unironically cope throughout the whole series, and holy cow, I almost cried during the first episode. Speaking of which, the runtime is relatively long too, like the first episode is like 1 hour and 20 minutes, and while the other 8 episodes is around 40 to 50 minutes, so it gives a lot of time for other characters and some emotional scenes when it wants to. But that as well brings the downside of the lack of zombies and the elongated and repetitive conflicts with the humans, which sometimes makes the adventure boring. However, this show nailed what makes a video game adaptation interesting by making a lot of efforts in using real-life materials, and it successfully makes a good zombie apocalypse adventure filled with dreads and fun. Now, this is a show my friend recommended me. As much as I find Alice in Borderland quite similar to it actually stands out on its own. It had a completely different concept than Squid Game, as it's more focused on like atmospheric horror, and it's what got me hooked. This series is just pure dread with a lot of deadly traps, and the more immersive part is the emotional element that played a crucial role in all earlier episodes, and by the time you made it to episode 3, you got hit with a cry fest. The show plays no jokes when it wants to be sad. Speaking of which, the characters are also depressing but yet likable. Some of them are just bad people, but you sympathize because they're all just trying to survive the shithole that they got thrown into for no reason. As I said, the show is like Squid Game but with more suspense, and the show did best in that aspect. However, completely cheesy and cliche interaction in the backstory moments really makes the choice of some character seems dumb. The CGI is also really bad and really annoyed the immersive experience, but it's still a good show that tries to challenge the audience moral in an unknown world that seems scary but also believable. Oh man, season 2, let's go. This season is just like the first one, but bigger and better, except the bad CGI. I love everything about it. However, it also contained one big problem, and I don't know if you noticed this, but each episode is around 15 minutes to an hour. Well, the majority is over an hour, and that is because it's full of elongated conversation between two characters that could have been trimmed down to probably 1 or 2 minutes. Like, please, I'm here for all the fun and stakes, not attending Friday khutbah, unless it is. So, Alice in Borderland Season 2 is easily another recommendation. A 2D animated series taking place in the Monsterverse, starring Nicolas Cage, the voice actor of Gumball. You know, at first I didn't know Nicolas was in the series until I saw a tweet from a sophisticated individual. Skull Island is a spin-off to Kong Skull Island. If you haven't watched that movie, go ahead, it's really good and it peaked everything before it went shit. So this series is basically that movie but animated, and well, it's not that bad. I mean, it goes as usual with the Skull Island and the monsters hidden inside, so that part and the story was good. I also like the complexities of the human characters because it is filled with a lot of conspiracy and betrayals, and it really helped the stakes. The backstories of some characters, including Kong himself, were done well, especially with ones that tries to be emotional. The threat was an absolute unit, and the show did not hold back the capability of the antagonist. But sadly, the short runtime for each episode, which is around 20 to 25 minutes, really holding back a lot of adventure that could have been longer, and in fact it makes everything less suspense, and by the time I finished the last episode, what the fuck is that ending? Again, it could have been longer, but yeah, aside from that, it's a good show. As a huge Star Wars fan, of course I had to check out the anime collection. The first season was fantastic. They nailed the classic anime art style in each episode, especially with the first and the last episode. It's not really special or anything, it's enjoyable. Now in season 2, they actually made the art style more diverse. It's not just anime art style this time. You got like Germanic, European folklore, Indian animation, stop motion, etc. Like, one of the episodes of the animation was done by the team who worked on Love, Death and Robot. And the story were actually more touching, and it's definitely way better than season 1. Invincible, the show with my man James Jonah Jameson, and he killed a bunch of babies in a train. The show honestly is the best and also the worst. Invincible is like the Justice League cartoon that came out in 2004 but with gore. Basically that's it. Its best aspect is the storytelling because the show spent a lot of time with characters you're fixated. Every episode is about, oh my god, after a long time, this show has 40 to 50 minutes of runtime. And it has its own adventure, so kind of bringing back the old cartoon feeling. Now there were some things that let down the show. First is the voice acting here is kinda wasted. Like, it has AAA voice actors, but this is literally almost every voice acting at its peak in the show.
Just knock some sense into the guy and throw him back where he came from. Easy.
How do I breathe in space?
That's the neat thing. You don't.
Like, Mr. Seaman, please, at least put some effort. The second one is that the main plot of season 1 had to sacrifice a bunch of cool characters that could have explored more, but had to be killed off by just the first episode, which is a shame. And the third is that the show could have easily been not mature because the plot of the story is very common in every superhero story, like parental issues, vigilante identity, and even collateral damage. The mature part only comes from brutality and the jokes that most of the time isn't adult-oriented. So sadly, it's a show that tries to be mature but failed in a lot of aspects. But it is genuinely a good show that got some things right, like the story, the theme, the characters, so it's still worth watching. Another video game adaptation of a game I've never played. I feel like this is the one show where they have a lot of advantage because of the IP. Like, the original game of Twisted Metal was action oriented and the show nailed the action that were birthed from the game. I love the set pieces of the modified car, guns and costumes, but just like The Last of Us, it focuses more on the human characters and their backstories rather than the actions of the cars going on each other. Now, don't get me wrong, Twisted Metal nailed the emotional side of the protagonist. But then it started to focus more on other characters and it just feels too much and it ends up getting pretty boring. The show really lacks cars and guns, but at least I really like the climax in the final episode, which is just full on action like Cars Battle Royale. A little tangent here, I love the character Sweet Tooth, not only because he's the iconic one from the game, but the show really fleshed him out so much to the point that by the end of the season, he feels more like an actual human being with feeling rather than a murderous psychopath. Overall, it's an enjoyable show with fun action, brutality, staggering environment, and it's just a fresh start series. James Gunn, the guy who made the awesome Peacemaker show, just hit us up one more time with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the final adventure for Guardians of the Galaxy, and damn, this movie actually made me cry 3 times. What I like about this movie is that it took the advantage of shining the characters that weren't talked about much in the previous 2 movies, and they tried to make up some epic backstories that actually made sense. Bradley Cooper, who voiced Rocket Raccoon, delivered it very well, and the very reason why I cried is because of his performance. Such characters as Star-Lord and a bunch of others are also unique and likable in their own way. My favorite part is the antagonist because he is just menacing. The movie tells a pretty linear story, which is fine in on itself. James Gunn just added the emotional and comedy tone just to make it more interesting. But unfortunately, it also followed the worst aspect, and that is, of course, is that the movie is like 80% forced jokes that just doesn't land, and it's just people screaming for no reason like any Piers Morgan debate. Nonetheless, the movie is good enough in the storytelling aspect, characterization, the emotional, which is the strongest aspect, and I have to say it's one of the best movies in 2023. Honor Amongst Thieves is a Dungeons and Dragons adaptation that came out of nowhere, and as much as how mediocre the trailer is, the movie was actually decent, and it's quite rare considering the cast is overdosed with AAA actors, which is the very thing that made a movie filled with emotionless characters. However, I was proven wrong. This movie did a pretty good job in fleshing out the fantastical medieval environment of a society with humans and furries that I actually felt immersed. The story was done quite well, like it tells in a forward and backward without it getting mixed up with other characters who are also likable and have unique personalities and abilities. I also like the movie is kind of like the Avengers with setting up the team as well. There's only one emotional bit that works for a moment, mainly because of a problem that this movie for some reason is mainly comedy, which most of the jokes doesn't even land. Like I don't know why, but so far every Hasbro product that has been adapted into live action movies always gets butchered in some ways. Overall, it's a good movie to watch with your family.
I'm saying the N-word.
Oh,
Into the Spider-Verse was a complete surprise because it's an animated Spider-Man movie that again came out of nowhere, and it spots the— oh my god, I can't believe I just made a spot pun. It spots the action of the story and the tone, and I have to admit that the sequel, Across the Spider-Verse, is like bigger and better. Like literally. It has more universe, more Spider-Man, more emotions and stakes, and I like the 2 antagonists, Oscar Isaac and The Spot. The one thing that really stands out for me is that the animation in Across the Spider-Verse borrows heavily from Arcane, and it fits really well with the plot of personal trauma. The only downside for the movie is that the ending just fell very flat because I didn't feel any threat as every character were in okay condition. But with that being said, Across the Spider-Verse is a must-watch Spider-Man movie.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. Shimmy, shimmy, yay, shimmy, yay, shimmy, ah. Drake, swa la la la. Drake, swa la la la, swa la la la, swa la la la.
The man, the myth, the legend, Ken. Alright, J. Robert Oppenheimer. This is a movie that I'm so hyped, not because of the actual hype of the Barbenheimer bit, but because this is a movie that centers around collateral damage done by the US government. As you know, Hollywood movies usually don't shine a light on that. So out of curiosity, I want to know how this movie handles the atomic bomb. The movie is unironically really good, from the storytelling, which follows back and forth time switch. So at one point it took place after the Hiroshima-Nagasaki bombing, and then it switches to when Oppenheimer was in college, and then it switches to when he was creating the atomic bomb. But director Christopher Nolan has always loved that type of storytelling. The sound design is great, but sometimes it gets very repetitive and annoying with the high bass thing when you go to like intense theme. Like, I really hate it, it's not good for my ears. The cinematography in some scenes when it tries to introduce a new place is just amazing. And also, this is probably the very first movie I've watched in a long time where every single character have deep backstory, or as our generation likes to call it, lore, which makes the movie and the stakes inside feels more lived in and believable. Every character have their own backstory and plots, and the director carefully compiled them together into one feature film that I think people should do this more often. The biggest downside is the climax. The reason why people came to watch this movie is because of Hiroshima Nagasaki, and sadly the movie didn't show it, which is a bummer for a movie with over $100 million budget. A minus downside is some little moments just felt too cliche. But overall, Oppenheimer is a movie that consistently moves you from one spectacle to another, with the world felt lived in, and the people and how they act felt real, and it's generally a blockbuster movie with a lot of passion.
Together we will find everything that we're looking for. One Piece.
So yeah, YouTubers recommended it because I'm being brainwashed to become their servant, and well, after binge watching all 8 episodes of One Piece, I have mixed feeling. First of all, it's definitely a really good show for even knowing that it was heavily based on the popular manga and anime, and of course, you'd expect a lot of worlds or places and characters with very huge backstory, and I'm impressed that the people behind it managed to cram a lot in just 8 episodes. And that is because each episode is over an hour long, which I've stated before is basically big storytelling, and I love it. What I like the most about this show is that even though it's an anime adaptation, it tries every aspect of storytelling to make it feel like it's something you'd see from Hollywood blockbuster like Lord of the Rings. Like from the cinematography, the fight scene, the music, the characters' emotion and attitude, the show tries to make you feel like you're watching something that's way different than the anime you are familiar with, and this is what live-action adaptation should be. Now, with what makes this show terrible isn't technically what it is, but it just doesn't make me immersed to the world inside of it. First is the costumes. The thing is, I don't get why they want every character to look like obvious cosplayer, because it just makes them seem out of place with the environments, but I guess it is what it is, and it's not much of a big complaint. My biggest complaint is that this show really lacks any emotional or darker tone. I get that One Piece is about action, adventure, and fun and family, but for an audience without the emotional tone, I cannot get immersed. The second biggest complaint is that most of the time the storytelling is just so cliche that I barely get any sense of dread or seriousness whenever a scene was supposed to be serious. However, One Piece at least managed to get the fun out of us all. The pacing is good, the character development is good, and it's definitely a really good show with so much effort. I can kind of understand why a lot of people tried so hard to defend this movie to the death, because this is probably the first indie game adapted into a Hollywood movie, and as expected, it's another victim of the video game adaptation curse. Like Five Nights at Freddy the game is about a night guard that keeps an eye off a restaurant, and Five Nights at Freddy the movie is about a night guard that sleeps. Sure, there were efforts on the set pieces to make it lifelike. The opening of the movie is actually decent because it just jumped into the case so that the audience get the gist of what the movie is all about. The internal drama of the protagonist was projected very well in the beginning, but the rest is just actual bad movie with really horrendous dialogue, bad acting to some extent, and most of the horror scenes weren't that scary. And it's one of my biggest complaints about this movie because it lacks stakes and suspense. Throughout the movie, you barely feel any threat because the animatronics acted like an average Hollywood cosplayer. It thinks like it's scary, but it's not. They don't even have any distinct personality, ability, or something. It's just boo-hoo, scary robot my ass. The other complaint is that the movie really doesn't know where it's headed because there's too many plots to follow. From dreaming to ghost robot to serial killer, and I haven't even jumped into the finale, which is just more crazy plots being shoved at you for no apparent reason to be there. Overall, it's definitely disappointing because I'm very familiar with the game being really good on both storytelling wise and the gameplay mechanic. The creator Scott Cawthon, who's heavily involved in the movie, knows how to make a good story, and I'm really shocked that this movie doesn't meet a lot of people's expectations. And the review from the harsh intolerant critics and the tolerant positive audience definitely doesn't help. I get that this movie tried to break the video game curse, but sorry, it doesn't work. Although if you do want to watch the movie, then go ahead. I'm just warning you that this is a really shit movie. What a change of pace to a really good solid movie. All Quiet on the Western Front is a movie that I didn't get to watch back in 2022, but now that I have, it is just gorgeous. This is truly an anti-war movie. I really like the pacing of the movie because it's not that complicated, and from the beginning you already given a slight idea of what bad things about to come, and the thrilling ambience really help making everything seem scary. I mean, this is a movie not suitable for children after all. The emotional set from each characters were laid out pretty balanced, like some will have the amount of screen time to tell their backstory and some doesn't. But again, I have to come back to the scary part because it is the strongest element of the movie. Every single second of watching the movie is just filled with dread. When it tries to be brutal, it does. When it tries to be suspenseful, it does. It's a very realistic and grounded movie of World War I and how people actually being deceived by going to war to make their family proud, only to face actual hell and never come back. The runtime is relatively long just because the audience will have some time to process what was going on in the movie because there's a lot that happened. The premise that I put forward is just the surface. This is one of my best recommendation movies, so please go watch All Quiet on the Western Front. It's scary, it's sad, it's just chef's kiss good. Now this is one good Netflix show that got me a bit conflicted. So Blue Eye Samurai is a Western animated series about, you name it, Blue Eye Samurai, and the theme is quite mature because it involves this world. And from the storytelling perspective, it's relatively good. I mean, the animation isn't the best, like something like Arcane is definitely way better, but the characters in the show are likable in their own way. Even the bad guys who gets their ass beaten in like the first 4 episodes actually comes back and tries to fight even when some of their body parts got cut off, which is something that most series don't do. And it elevates the stakes of the show, like the protagonist, who's just an ordinary samurai, actually face up dozens of criminal masterminds. And just like most animated Netflix show, it can get emotional when it wants to be, and it also poses a bit of a problem. Because it sets in a place where it's morally gray, so when there's an emotional scene, it just doesn't hit hard, and with the protagonist throughout the show being immune to any trauma just proves my point. Now that's the only minus of it. Now this is the conflicted part. A lot of the things on the show is just purely over-exaggerated to the point that it comes across as kind of bastardizing Japanese cultures. I mean, look, this show took place in 17th century Japan, right? But the runtime of the whole season is like 50% samurai and then 50% sex and cocks. I kid you not, there's a scene from I think episode 7 or 8 where it goes like, "Here Miss Bride, a radish raw meat with the topping of horse semen." My thoughts is probably mostly inaccurate, but that horse semen bit is in the show. A lot of the representation of Japanese culture is just treating women as a pleasure, and it just rubs me the wrong way. I don't know about you guys who have watched the show, you guys can probably correct me here, but yeah, it's a good show overall, and for those who haven't watched it yet, go ahead. I just find it off that a Western studio depicts foreign culture as quite misogynistic, but yeah, maybe I'm wrong, we don't know. The first season of the Loki show is just as uninteresting as most Marvel projects these days. It makes you think that it's a show about multiversal adventure and Loki having bromance, but no, it's just boring drama and talking and talking. Although the final episode hits us with a really good payoff where Loki fought his variant, which I find it entertaining. Now season 2 is like the bigger and better. The world is bigger and the drama and talking does get better. I genuinely feel so bad for season 2 because the actor who's supposed to play the powerful antagonist literally got knocked out of reality because of lawsuit and he lost. Ironically, Kang the Conqueror got conquered by the judicial system. Watching the second season was so painful because of how fucking bland and stupid the story is. In earlier episodes, it introduces you to there's a big problem, but it's only mentioned and not seen, and it's even more painful that the good guys start to get emotional over the problem that happened, and it is just cringe. Like, the dialogue is just so bad. It also took like 2 episodes, so we were left at only 4 episodes to go. Speaking of which, every episode feels like an adventure that doesn't go anywhere, and the lack of antagonists makes it even more boring. The rest of the characters are also just fucking annoying, seeing as every single one of them just either get angry for no reason, asking inappropriate questions, and the most common one is the unwillingness to do the right thing that could have saved the day. Oh my god, and Loki falls under that category, and I'ma just say it, it's because he falls in love with a woman who's believed in a collective punishment and is the main reason why the whole conflict of the show started. So Loki is a fucking pussy and a sim. And the ending doesn't even make sense. I generally don't have a clue what was going on with this scene. It's just shits happen and accept it for what it is. This show is made by a lot of dumb fucks, and it's a shame because the cast and the characters they portray could have been more interesting, but the show just holds back everything. Again, it's just everything wrong with season 1 but bigger and better. Unfortunately, I haven't watched the live-action Scott Pilgrim movie, but I was fortunate enough to be alive in a time that there's an anime of Scott Pilgrim that I get to watch, and I'm in love with it right away. As far as I'm aware, the movie was critically acclaimed, so I'm just very hyped. Now, the anime is a bit of an up and down. I must admit that I'm pretty biased, but the show's strongest element is when it proves to the audience that it's an anime, and it's not just the art style, but mainly through the fight scene, and it is just incredible. But also a shame that there's very few fight scenes throughout the show that was based off of a comic book about fighting. I mean, I have to give the benefit of the doubt that the rest was for the characters to communicate and backstories, but sadly it got stretched so much that it is becoming yet another Loki. Oh my god, I just talked about Loki. Look, this show has 10 episodes. The least they could do is make every episode filled with different adventures and fun, but most of the time it just got too much that I almost kind of annoyed. The final fight is amazing. I like that it regroups every character from the movie. And oh yeah, they also got the original cast from the movie, including Michael Cera, Kieran Culkin, Chris Evans, and most of them did an amazing voice acting, unlike Invincible. Overall, it's a decent show. I like it, but I'm afraid for anime covers and weebs, they might find it a bit disappointing with the lack of fight scenes, which if you don't care, then go ahead and watch Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Imagine scrolling on the internet and just out of nowhere stumbled upon an average animated series titled Scavenger's Raid. This is an animated horror series that really went under the radar, that literally no critic YouTuber ever talked about it, as far as I'm aware, but here I am reviewing it. Scavenger's Raid is a beautiful series. It sets in an atmospheric horror world of an unknown planet. The premise is that a bunch of strangers got lost in an unknown alien planet that's beautiful and scary at the same time. On it contains dangerous life forms that can project powers beyond human comprehension. One unique thing from the show is that it really subjects our expectations. Like at some point we would expect that the character we're focusing on is about to die or going on a dangerous route, but actually what happened afterward doesn't come close to our expectation. And I guess that played really well with the suspense of horror, because at every corner you would expect bad, horrifying, or just downright disgusting shit. The characters are all likable, even the bad ones. The pacing of the story is good enough. The visuals is just amazing. The art style fits really well with the horror theme now that I think about it. And it has over 12 episodes, which is just... The one aspect that really bothered me is the antagonist just comes across as unlikable with his motives, like he's just outright arrogant. However, this is a show that more people should give it a watch. It's really good. Fire or what?
Speed up, please, motherfucker! Come back!
I'ma just say it, Gran Turismo is the best video game adaptation movie ever, and that's for reasons more valid than Ridley Scott making a historical movie. Oh my god, I haven't even watched Napoleon. You know what? That's probably a good thing. The characters are solid, the world building is solid, And part of that is because the people behind this movie knew how to make a live-action movie that's based off of a video game. It cherishes those video game moments in its most intense scene in a not-so-subtle way. Sure, this movie was based on a true story, but it integrates the game and the movie as if some elements of the movie comes from the game. Aside from another part that makes it a really good film is the storytelling. It nails the world building and characterization. It knows how to get the audience to keep watching from which part of the act of racing the movie needs to show first, and with the characters, it captured their feelings pretty well. And what I like the most overall is the theme. It's quite light-hearted, but the movie doesn't shun away from very dark moments, and when that happens, it completely restrains itself from any comedy, inspiring music, basically anything that doesn't align with darker tones. I also like the awesome performance by most actors in the movie. They all really bring the seriousness into it, and like, you must watch Gran Turismo. It's probably one of the best movies of 2023. Psalm 100 is the only anime I'm really interested because of the concept. It followed the harsh and inhumane condition of working in the office, and when the zombie apocalypse happened, our protagonist left happy of being free from the living hell of his life to start a bucket list of things he wants to do in his life before he dies. Sadly, the anime is another good story being butchered by the overload of comedy and cliche plots that it just makes it almost entirely terrible. But first, I must appreciate the good efforts. Every episode makes you feel the immersive fun of the unique dumb adventure of something as simple as going out of your room. Wow, this is relatable. The characters are also hilariously dumb and likable. The show at least projects most of the good guys as insane and only have one remaining brain cell, so it makes sense and funny that they, out of all people, were the ones that had to face the zombies in an alarming rate. Speaking of which, the comedy most of the time isn't cheesy, so you won't feel the average cringe fest. The animation is also top tier, and it's the very thing that makes me like this anime. That also goes with the visuals, especially with the sequence of our protagonist experiencing the working condition. The show handles it very well and actually being serious about it. But then, ironically, it went hiatus for a while because of the very same reason from the plot, and holy shit, with the last 3 episodes, the quality of the story really fallen downhill. Specifically, the finale is just frustrating as it turns the complete opposite of the ambience of the anime. So overall, it is a good anime, but halfway through, the story started to get worse and worse. The first season of What If is incredible, easily one of my favorite animated series. The story for each episode is good, the fight scene is just overhyped, and I like it. Season 2 is the same but followed with more wider theme. At some point, the episodes felt like it ran out of idea, but it's still good nonetheless. The climax, however, is just shit. For comparison, the finale from the first season was to group almost every character from previous episode to fight an evil intellectual sought to destroy the multiverse. Season 2 is that, but there's only 2 characters. One is from the previous season and the other one is new but only have 1 original episode. And oh my god, I'm just going to spoil it for you, I don't care. So Doctor Strange from the first season is trying to rebuild his universe because he destroyed it. That's it. Literally the plot of Multiverse of Madness, but you just swap Wanda with Doctor Strange. Same trait of not learning their lessons, but just different characters. This is just retarded. Just like any other series that I willingly watch, critics on YouTube starts going crazy over this, so again, I watch it and it's I kind of understand now why those people like this show. But seriously, this show slaps. Like, it slaps harder than my dad. This show rebooted yet another Superman origin story, and this one has the best arc I've seen by far. The basic of the story was good enough, but the characters were the one that got me hooked. Every single one of them have distinct personality and backstories that the show spent a good amount given the 20 to 22 minutes of runtime for each episode. The story of Superman is great and also biased as usual. Like, yeah, I kind of ponder upon the question as to why a 22-year-old man can walk freely from using steroids. The only downside is that the show really lacks any emotional moments. Like, when a scene is trying to be sad, the music didn't go sad, the runtime gets shorter, and the lighting just gets brighter. Like, it's just so awkward, but yeah, overall it's a really good show. With all the garbage movies and shows that have come out and sucking my souls like the Dementor from Harry Potter who wants to see the world burn after spending 60 seconds on Twitter, so this is Monarch Legacy of Monsters. Or more like Legacy of 3 monsters that barely appeared and the rest is just talking and talking and talking. It's really sad that this show was the only show in 2023 that I'm excited for, but yeah. So for context, this is a spin-off of Godzilla and Kong Skull Island, and Kong Skull Island had more monsters than this show, and then the spin-off cartoon with Gumball had even more monsters than this show. But that doesn't prove the beautiful storytelling that can be best described as a walking simulator 2023 with New Year's DLC. To be fair, the pacing of the story is quite good actually, with each linear but different adventures were given enough time to sort of get you immersed. The amazing set pieces of the flashback that took place in the 50s also helped that. More good things is the monsters are unique. Anyway, it's just a shame that most of the adventures were just elongated walking in an environment that took almost 2 episodes. And in addition to that, you also have horrendous dialogue that will send you back to the time of a Scottish man who got martyred by talking to Thor's girlfriend.
Anakin has turned to the dark side.
You're wrong. How could you even say that? I don't believe you.
If I could kill it, I would. But I legally can't.
There's also a lot of awful green screen effects. I guess the disappointing and infuriating part is that the show is just so bland that it doesn't go anywhere, and it doesn't dare to go anywhere. There's not a lot of adventures to go despite it was given 10 episodes. There were even some important characters that I liked that doesn't have enough backstory to cover because the show was busy giving us a scene of hardcore gay sex. So in short, it suffers the same disease as the Loki show, with most of the adventures were just walking and talking that goes back and forth, and oh my god, I'm not talking about this shit. So yeah, that's about it. To be honest, the ranking was very difficult because all of these movies and shows were almost equally good, so I was genuinely confused for a moment. I'm also very sorry that I missed a lot of good movies like Super Mario, Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, TMNT, Mutant Mayhem, and even The Killer. Oh my god, my college semester is eating me alive. I'm actually really regretting that I haven't watched The Killer, so I'm probably going to watch it soon. So to close this video, I'd like to thank everyone for watching this video. Look, I know you guys are new viewers, so I think it's time to plug my short film, The Dash. I've made it in about 3 months, and I'm very proud that it's finally done. And you guys can actually watch it right now through the link in the description below or from the end of this video. Anyway, 2023 is already a messy year. I'm happy to walk away from that. So in 2024, let's start good.